So I'll talk about the gable and the sidewall at the same time. So it's basically starting with a J-trim. Okay, we call this the universal channel because it goes with a couple of things. So this is set up directly even with your gable. If we were working on, let's say we were coming into a wall, it would be flipped around and cut into the wall. We're always wanting a little bit of an extrusion or extension out over so that water's coming off the roof, okay? When I take my panel, especially the one down towards the bottom, we want to do a little bit of a trim on the clip lock that hangs here, because if you think about the back side here, it works as a hook, right? So it can actually hook. If we had an absolute deluge of water coming down here, it could catch and kind of run sideways. So we do a little bit of trim. It also helps to keep this from really sort of flaring up at the edge, okay? So in fine fashion, I've pre-cut that nose. It's very simple, hooks on, gets put in place, and then we've got adequate drainage. Okay, so all of this is essentially just if we've got a real wind concern, okay, we are going to add extra fasteners. I mean, typically I use screws here because it's on here, but they're probably going to just use regular roofing nails and put those on. So anytime we've got a wind potential, then all we're going to do is just double the fasteners, or not quite double them, but up the fasteners, right? And the key is down at the eave and up the gables. They're sort of most susceptible, okay? So on a panel, we go 5 fasteners as normal, but if you're in a high wind environment, you push that to 7, right? So you're just sort of adding on. So one of the neat things to remember, and a little bit of a difference when you're dealing with a panelized system like this versus the long run steel, right? Whether it's agricultural where you see all the screws or a standing seam, is that the expansion and contraction of metal, it's real, but on a piece of metal that's really only this big, the coefficient of expansion is very small. And in fact, if you think about it, these panels are really only fixed at one point, right? So the next panel that hooks over and catches on this lip, it's not pinned there by a screw. So if there's any sort of movement, it's free to move, doesn't harm, doesn't tilt out the screws, right? Where we talk about issues with long run steel, if you think about the coefficient of expansion is about a 64th of an inch a foot, right? Which seems negligible, but if you have a 40-foot run, all of a sudden, that can really make some movement, and over the years, you start to see movement on those screws, okay? With this stuff, it's just not, it's not even a thought that needs to be considered. So, the next panel, and because we're working with a short deck, I had to do a little cut here. So what we've got, actually it's kind of hard to see from there, but if you can see this fold over, so one of the upgrades that we did when we made the new profile is we were able to punch out the metal so that when it's folded over, this actually almost works like I want to call it like a receptacle, right, to catch this side. So again, because I'm just working on a couple little mini bits of track. So now what I've got, so I've got our standard side lap. Okay, what's nice about this is we've got sort of almost like a little compression in here where this panel tucks nicely in. So the visual of the side lap is hidden by the structure of the slate, so it's not as visual as some of the older versions. And because this tucks into that little fold over, you've got just a little bit more protection for water going up this way. Okay? So let me just take this in place here. Okay, so I've done the same trim. So if you think about it, especially at the bottom of whether it's the valley or whether it's a gable, is especially a valley, you're going to get a lot of water collecting, and that volume of water as it's rolling down just gets bigger and bigger. And so we do want to make sure that there's no hindrance down here for getting it off the roof. Okay? This is a little tight, so it's a little bit of an awkward sort of setup to try to get panels in here. You've got gable channel going to have to come down, but you just have to put these things together so that the final exit is free and clear, right? I've seen over the years where, this kind of looks messy, this kind of comes over, so a real tinsmith will fold it over. They'll have this drip edge will be continuing under here. They can actually seam it. Okay, it all depends on the contractor. I have seen where they just tucked everything in, brought this clip lock right over here, buried the valley, because it's beautiful. However, it catches absolutely all the water that's coming down, it sends it sideways, and then because they're in fastener systems, you pretty much have to zipper down the roof to fix the problem and put it back. Okay? So the valley, so if you think about any time, now I've just joined these two, I just butted them up here, but if we're using multiple pieces of flashing, we're gonna nip and tuck them so that the top one overlaps the bottom one and the flow is continuous, right? It's all common sense with water flowing, and like I said, part of the goal of this and sort of getting some of this on video is just understanding that it's straightforward, that you're going to find your asphalt contractors might be afraid because it's different, right? It's different from how they're used to putting on asphalt. There's a few more bits and pieces. It's slower. You've got to trim it, right? So it's really not something to be afraid of. And as we get our sort of library of information together and library of videos together, we'll be able to direct them, right? So if they're on the first job, if it's, hopefully it's before they're on the first job that we're having these conversations, because that can get awkward when we're explaining as they go. But through video technology, through FaceTime, and then if the timing is right for us to be on, or for me to be on the job, right? I can only do this sort of installation to sort of show how bits and pieces go, but I'm really good at talking about how to do it and then letting their trade hands actually put the stuff together, right?